All right, so while we have some characters still changing, I figured we might as well get this party started and start talking. So we have one of our directors over here, Dylan Raspberry. And then you've already met some of us because we talked before the show. So expert in all things Western and cowboy. David Davis. Our okay. And then I am here for any Shakespeare academic questions, but really these are the people we want to talk to. So, does anybody have any questions off the bat that they would like to ask our amazing director, actors, any of the above? Or I can get started.
What was the inspiration to do a setting Macbeth, or whose idea was
that? Kind of all three of us in our little directing trio. I know Justin and I were talking whenever the theater had talked to us about Macbeth. We were like throwing out all the different ways you could interpret it. Ooh, 70s Macbeth. And then Justin said cowboy Macbeth. And we were like, wait. Say that again. And then we kind of fleshed out more like these awesome things, like the corruptive nature of ambition and how we could manifest that like on our stage and the interpersonal relationships and how it corrodes those within itself. And we kind of had this really fun concept of if you benefit from a system that's inherently inequitable and you do nothing with your privilege to dismantle that system or help it in any way, then you yourself are fated to fall victim to it. We see this with the ascension of power with Macbeth and then with Malcolm at the end.
Great question to start us off with. So I've had the opportunity to talk to all three of the lovely director squad. And you all were like, yeah, it worked. And I was like, oh, it worked. Like that was awesome. But I had a question because you decided to murder Duncan on stage. And I thought that was such an interesting choice because in the productions, that is, you don't kill a king on stage, right? So I thought that was really interesting in lieu of one of the most savage of Shakespeare's plays where we kill children on stage, not a king. So what made you decide to put that scene on stage?
I think when we were looking at it, we needed to see Macbeth go full send, go commit all the way to it. And it's easy to imagine it and talk about it as it happened off stage, but I think it's more potent and it brings this Western aspect to a higher platform if we truly see him murder this man that he's spoken highly about and is also his family. I mean, and just based off of one person, spirit's advice to just go full send and kill him. I think it was important that we had to see that, and I think Macbeth struggles with it the rest of the show, so the audience has to see it.
Any other questions from the crew? I have one for our lovely witch, singular. So,
her stomach.
How fitting. So, one, you're on your own. Your weird sisters became just you. And so I'm curious about that and how that was in terms of performance, and then also about the repetition of your lines at the end in terms of you all decided to give a repetition of that first scene at the end of it as a conclusion, and gave another woman ending lines in a Shakespeare play. All right. So I just wanted to hear what your thoughts were to those elements.
Yeah, I think in terms of performance, it was a lovely challenge because I did this show, it was my first show in college ever, and I was the witch then as well, but there were 7 of us. And so I've never seen one or done one where there's just one. And I think that the opportunity there is figuring out, even though this is a small space, how to command the room and convey that message that she is from the earth, she is everything and everywhere. So I had an interesting time figuring that out throughout the process, and performance-wise, I think it definitely challenged me to just, that fourth wall doesn't exist. I am here with everyone, and I'm here with them, and I'm here with them. And then as far as, what was the latter portion?
The repetition.
The
of
repetition,
the line.
yes. So that was a deliberate choice artistically, and I thought it was brilliant because it very much goes along with the original aspect of choosing something that is hierarchical in nature and cyclical, and it's falling victim to a system that is allowed to happen, and having the witch start at the beginning with those same set of lines, and then at the end, and also starting the top of Act 2, is just another way to show that someone, somewhere, or something is always watching. And it doesn't matter if you think you're doing the right thing, if it's not for anyone else's gain or benefit. It's, I think it helps with the selfishness of all of the characters, honestly, because our specific take was survival of the
That's kind of how this one plays out, isn't it?
fittest. Yeah.
So you, it sounds like that you were saying that you. I just.
So we actually had a choreographer, movement coordinator, Natasha Bufdell. She is a brilliant artist, and we all worked together to take her movements and make them into what the show was. She's very amazing at letting the creative flow happen, and so I really appreciated that as far as it goes, because what I wanted to make sure got across is the witch is in control, but she's also not. She is of the sea and of the land and the wind, so she is also being influenced. I think that is important to note, that what we wanted for to start was rising from the ashes in a way, but we are being close to the ground and then slowly coming up and more out, and also be more confident with the movement as well, but as the witch, so letting the movement carry her the longer.
I have a question as well. I'm curious to know, for the performers, any and all, how did it feel kind of melding these two histories, right? We have Shakespeare, which we talked about in the pre-show, and we also have this Oklahoma history, right? So how was that, finding that balance, like allowing your experience to happen, if that makes sense?
Talking about the cyclical nature of systems that are inequitable, I think the land run Oklahoma is a perfect example of that, which I really appreciated this concept coming to life and telling that story, because it's a perfect portrayal of the broken system, because at that time it was just horrific the way that they were just giving people this land that was not theirs to give, and it was just broken to begin with. So
I think something that we had talked about as well in table work was the fact that history is not how we remember it, it's how it was chosen to be written. It was decided what was going to be remembered and not what it was. An example of how history is not as it seems, and likely that's why it repeats itself, because it's bent to the will of man. How can we learn?
The West, like land run era Oklahoma, it is such a, like what Jason you mentioned a moment ago, our concept was survival of the fittest. It was brutal, and it was people stealing land, people killing each other for their own of the story and way of life of.
On that, I thought it was really interesting being able to kind of correlate these ideas of this like lawless land that we're in versus this like pre-traditional hierarchical structure you have like within the Scottish nobility, and kind of finding our place as our characters within that hierarchy or lack thereof, and figuring out what that power structure looked like and what it looked like for Macbeth to just take it. I think all of that was really, really interesting. Establish what it meant for us in a place where you don't have a set, followable, like structure of a hierarchy like that.
I have a question for the audience. Who are some of your favorite characters? And you all can answer as well, but who did you connect with or struggle because you were connecting with them?
Yeah.
Any characters jump out at you?
Definitely big.
Other ones? Or you can go with don't like, and characters that you really didn't like. That's fine too. Sometimes it's awesome to be hated. It's okay.
I thought Lady Macbeth was great. I appreciated Macduff. I always think Macduff is sort of like a sleeper.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I just appreciate a solid Macduff. More personality.
I delightfully loathe Malcolm.
Why? I know.
Because he is the most unlikable hero ever. He's like, suck it up, man. Like, your whole family just suffered. It's fine. Brush it off. Sharpen your knives. Let's go. And you're just like, and then he's like, and also, by the way, I have lots of flaws. I'm probably as bad as Macbeth is. And you're just like, oh, good. Okay, this is fine.
I think that's the nature of privilege, though. It's just them talking about privilege and the land run. In correlation to Oklahoma, it's not just you're not. I think the people who were coming here weren't thinking of, oh, we're taking this land from people. They were the others, so they weren't. There wasn't any consideration, but they were fighting one another. So it wasn't just like a us versus them. It was me versus everyone else. And I think that's very American, good and bad, very individualized, a blessing and a curse. But I think in the context of privilege with Malcolm, it's hard to empathize or think about others when you have so much. And when that's threatened, it's scary. And I do struggle with that a little bit. It just toward the end, it's just like, God, like I don't feel like I'm being manipulative, but I think I am, in the sense of not wanting to get my hands dirty, being altruistic and philosophical, but also feeling a little protected by everyone, like not them also not wanting me to be touched by this awfulness. But I think at the end, when she's prophesying, it's just going to repeat itself again. Fleance might come back, or if Macduff has children, again, their children might come back and just repeat the same thing with me. And I'll suffer the fate of my family.
I will say one thing that I remember talking about early on with Kaylee is the unfortunate nature of Lady Macbeth, because she's never there until the very end, and then she dies, and how she's a vessel for Macbeth's descent into madness. And I know one thing that we love with that short little bit that we get in Me as the Gentlewoman / Witch is coming to warn her, even though I know she's going to die. But it's a last attempt, and I can see she has fire and survival, and she's not afraid to tell the truth.
And I'm so glad that we have that moment because I think it does help show not the brutality of Macbeth, but the love and care and voice that she's been given. She wouldn't be fighting.
I think this particular adaptation has been giving those characters more of a voice. And I love the amount of agency that the women in this production get. I think it's really beautiful, especially for text that's old. And I think it's really cool to have, I'm biased, obviously, but to have all of us come out here and to have just as much agency as the men in the show and to be able to affect the world for better or for worse just as much. I think it's really cool that Lady Macduff gets to do that. Again, biased. I think it's really cool that I get to do that as a thing. I think that's pretty neat.
I do appreciate Belle's push to give Lady Macduff more command. Like in traditional productions of Macbeth, she just gets killed on stage and has a baby and is defenseless. But Belle was really big on pushing that she is able to fight back, and so in the fight choreo, I was really excited to see that they were no, she has a dagger and she tries to swing at him, which was gives a lot of agency to she's like a painter woman. She's great.
I noticed that in the build-up. I was like, oh, I think Lady Macduff is packed.
They're all packing. They're all packing.
Yeah. I want to ask a question about that. So I assume it was a very conscious decision to leave all the knives that were on stage unholstered. Maybe there was one on stage that actually had a holster. But most of the knives were just bare, right?
Spencer, yeah.
So what was the thought process behind that? Was that intentional?
We talked to our costume designer about it, and that's kind of how they would have carried them out in the day. It's just because they used them so often that they just would have them tucked into whatever belt or gun holster they had to have easy accessibility for it. And we kind of needed the same for as many dagger fights as we had in the show. They had to be. We couldn't take them and be let me get my knife out of my holster. No, they had to be ready and go. Yeah.
Was the fight choreography difficult in such a small space? Because I feel like when you're out there and you're fighting and people are kind of a little bit further away from you, it might be a little easier. Here, we are front row, you're in the show. It was up front and center. So was that more difficult, some of those fight scenes?
I think it's a fun challenge to have the audience that close. They're part of the fight with you. They are seeing so much nuance they wouldn't catch on the outdoor stage. They're seeing the exhaustion, the tiredness, the cries for help, right 3 feet in front of them. So I think it's a cool challenge to do it. And I think there's certain moves that we had to adjust, but that knife fight is how a knife fight would go about. They're quick and they are close in proximity. To do a full-fledged sword fight would be harder to do in this, but a dagger fight is something achievable here.
It's also really nice because having the audience so close to you, as the fight ramps up and gets more brutal and the audience gets into it more, you can feel the tension in the room, and it just drives the emotional life of the character in that fight even more forward, and you get more into it, and then the audience gets more into it, and then it just ramps up until somebody dies.
I think it's really cool to have them so close, to have the audience so close. At least for me personally, it makes it feel more personal. I think in a show like this with so much violence, it would be easy to sort of become desensitized to it after a bit. But I think it almost drives home just how brutal and nasty all of this is. And being that close to somebody else's anguish is. I haven't seen the show in the audience, but I imagine it's pretty impactful. I think it's a bit more. It kind of forces you to be in it, which I think is cool.
I would agree with that also, just movement. At the very beginning, rising from my stuff and crying. I've heard many reactions. It just propels me forward. So I think it is a challenge, but it's also very enlivening of the atmosphere, and it
us to feed off of that energy and tension, not just from the audience, but each other, all of it. And another moment of that is during our hoedown, whenever we're all dancing, and as a gentlewoman, y'all better clap. Like, that wall does not exist to me, even when I'm a gentlewoman. So I think it just allows more play. We do have about 3 minutes left.
Okay. Anybody have a last question? I heard somebody.
Oh my gosh, there's about hat color. So I wasn't paying attention until a little later, and I was like, okay, this is actually pretty accurate. So we're doing our hat colors as they're supposed to be with that. And then it's a little bit like changed. Was I not paying attention enough with that color?
I think most of our bad guys are in the black hats, and then
Until the end.
until the end, yeah, until the end, yeah.
The black hat is kind of like
Our crown.
yeah.
Yeah.
We had a question.
Oh.
So, for we played this set in Eagle Scout, was it firearms? Like, how did it? Because it was seamless. It worked very well.
Well, it was another fun challenge, especially to do it in this space. But our awesome fight choreographer, Chris Cuss, helped us find all the angles and to use operative words that would tie in like guns. And Steel, yes.
My steel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was lots of looking through the text and being like, oh, we say sword here, can't say
Yeah.
steel. Must be steel. Does it scan? Okay, great.
It was definitely interesting having to take that into account, just because there's so many things that you have to think about. Like, we have to make sure in that like gun struggle, the struggle to disarm, that I'm never pointing it at an actual audience member. We don't want to bring you too far into it. Obviously, our guns are not loaded.
They're all prop guns. They're all they're all safe.
Yeah.
Not at all.
There's definitely an awareness that comes to it. I think it's cool.
I do want to say, my boyfriend came to see the show last weekend, and the moment where Macbeth comes in and Macbeth like points his gun at looking at him, I was like, I when we started doing it, I was like, this is very cool, and like, we've added the westernness of the guns, but he was like, he was a cowboy kid. He was like, it was so cool, and I was like, it was just, it's been great. I love the concept of out of this.
Yeah, that's a comment that I feel like I have to make, is that, coming from the perspective of, Western American history and the history of the cowboy and everything that my job is all about, the seamlessness of this production going into, the West, it really speaks to our own pop culture, our shared pop culture and the mythology of the American cowboy in the West and Western film. I mean, I think you guys kind of hit the nail on the head, as a matter of fact. It just shows how, storytelling, human storytelling, going back as far as Shakespeare and even further back, all of our ancestral storytelling has echoes that are similar. And, you guys took this and made it a Western movie from the 60s, and it was amazing. So kudos to you guys. It's great. Fantastic.
Well, that's a perfect note to end on. You were all amazing. Thank you all for staying out.